I've got freaking cheese puffs. Family size. And because of that, I don't want to be freaking changing and touching my keyboard while I eat my snacks. So let's enjoy this together, and let's get into the freaking Q&A. I'm going to mute my mic, but if I really need to speak, I will bring it, but I probably won't. But if you guys got questions, post down below. If you're tuning in live, post in the live stream chat. But without me interrupting these people anymore, let's go.
I'm going to go ahead and get started here with announcing who our team is. Speaking of the WoW development team, we have 6 of their leaders with us today. Executive producer John Haidt, game director Ian Hazakostas, lead producer Holly Longdale, art director Eli Cannon. We have lead narrative designer Steve Denuser and lead software engineer Brian Birmingham. Thank you all for being here. All right, let's get started. It has been a very exciting con so far, and I'd like to start with Steve. A lot of players want to know more about Sylvanas and Anduin. Today was shocking for many of us. In your first looks at the Chains of Domination, we learned that she's going to be a boss in the next raid, and the Sanctum of Domination is what that's called. And in the cinematic for the patch, Anduin went a little nuts. Everybody wants to know more. Can you elaborate on what we saw and tell us more about what you have in store for us with these characters?
A little nuts. Wow. Well, yeah. So the story of Anduin and Sylvanas and their relationship with the jailer, that triangle is really foundational to the story of Shadowlands. And it's something obviously that unfolded from the very first moments of going into the Maw, all the way through our ventures into Torghast, trying to free our allies. And it really culminated in the 9-0 time frame with that cliffhanger moment of Sylvanas holding the sword out in that pose, and Anduin challenging her, saying, "This is, the power's in your hands. What are you going to do with it?" And we wanted to leave it at a cliffhanger there, but not for too long. And so it's awesome for BlizzCon Online to have that chance to now show you what happened. And so we learn what happened, right? We see that Anduin was in fact dominated, and we understand now why the jailer was looking for someone with those qualities. They needed to be someone who could walk in the front door of Bastion and meet the requirements of that. So they needed to be that hero. They needed someone with Anduin's heart to be able to do what he did. But of course, Anduin wasn't in control of his actions there. And so we see him attack, speaking with the jailer's voice. But in that moment, we do see, as the kind of sigil is drawing out from the Arkhan, we see that moment where Anduin does regain some control, and he's horrified by what he's doing. So, that tells us that Anduin's still in there. He's not gone by any means, but then we see the jailer's influence kind of tighten the leash again and have him complete his mission, which is to bring that Covenant sigil to the jailer, and we find out that that's a key that he needs. And as we play through Chains of Domination, we'll find out more about what that entails and how that fits into the jailer's ultimate plan.
Oh, sorry, there was this moment when that was happening, when you just described it, when Anduin kind of comes to himself again, looks horrified about what he's done, and then the jailer remotely sort of amps it up again, and you see those runes on his armor kind of ignite, and he goes back into that sort of place that we just saw him in. And my question is, when he walks past Uther on his way in there, or Luther as everybody calls him,
we call him that.
Does Uther know this? Can you speak to that at all? Did Uther know what was happening there, or is Uther just feeling bad because he knows Anduin and is having a little guilt there?
Well, there's a couple things going on there. So there's number one, there's just the look on Uther's face, which I've already seen 100 memes about, and that's awesome. But you see what his hand does. He reaches up and he touches that wound that's on his chest, the wound that was made by a weapon of the Maw. And so on some level, Uther recognized that power, and I'm sure it was not lost on him as well that there was this kingly figure walking in with long blonde hair, and that certainly stirred some memories in him as well. So all of those details, those are the things that we just pour over as we're creating these cinematics, and we have an awesome cinematics team. Taryn Gregory and his team just doing phenomenal work. I think the quality of what they've done in Shadowlands in particular has just been amazing, the little nuances. And so you see those moments of Anduin being horrified. You see when Sylvanas looks at him and kind of is in her eyes is pondering what's going on. So even though we find out that she did the thing that she did, it's clear that there's a lot more going on the surface, and that will be explored more fully throughout the course of Chains of Domination. And yeah, it does lead to that final conflict within the Sanctum of Domination, the Jailer's Stronghold, where Sylvanas is the last boss of the raid. And I'm not going to give any spoilers, but what I will say is that confrontation, I can say that I think it's going to be one of the most epic moments in our rating, because it has so much story behind it. And we've spent so long now getting to know Sylvanas, seeing all these facets of her, the hero, the ranger general, the banshee, now this Maw-empowered form that was able to go to the top of Icecrown and throw the frozen throne at Bolvar. All of those facets will come into play in this encounter, and it's not going to be a simple matter of walking in there and playing our swords against Sylvanas. There's a lot of story wrapped up into that, and it's going to be a super exciting confrontation.
Yeah, maybe she'll have a moment to have that eye looked at. She hasn't had anything done to it since it got cut. I hope she's okay.
You should count the number of characters in Shadowlands who are carrying one kind of scar or another, because it's a lot of them.
Well, they are their scars, as one famously said. Holly, let's move to you for a second. Classic is now going to get Burning Crusade right along with it. Burning Crusade Classic was announced today, and we got a great opportunity, or yesterday rather, great opportunity listening to you talk about it. Many players are asking a lot of questions about that. So, for example, when moving from Classic to Burning Crusade, while keeping a copy of my character, let's say, on Classic to play separately, what's that going to look like for my gold or my items in the bank? Am I going to see any differences when I first log into that character on the two different realms I'm then on? And will they then go off into their own separate timelines, never to join again?
Great question. So I'm going to do my best to explain this simply because we weren't able to get into a lot of the details. So for you, I'm going to give you an example of how it's going to work. In my case, I'm going to use my very original character named Holly on Wormrest Accord. And I've got we'll assume I don't play a lot of alts. Let's just say I have two characters. So I've got a level 60. When I log in on pre-patch, I will log in at that moment in time. We are taking a snapshot of the character when the servers are brought down at pre-patch. That snapshot is going to be copied to Classic Era and for Burning Crusade and the current server you're on. So when you log in, I see Holly on Wormrest Accord. I'll see an option when I select Holly. Do I want to move on into Burning Crusade Classic, or do I choose to play in Classic Era? If I choose to move on into Burning Crusade Classic, I click the button, I'm off and running. So if I select my level 30, also originally named Halia character, and I decide, okay, this is my character, she's 30, I'm going to go to Classic Era and continue leveling up and enjoying my experience in Classic with my friends, I select Classic Era. So what that's going to look like for me on Wormrest Accord that's moving on into Burning Crusade Classic is that character will look inactive. Then I will go to the Battle.net app, I will install Classic Era, then I will log into Classic Era to Wormrest Accord, the same server, and then I will be able to play Halia. I will have the same gold on both. I will have the same friends list on both. Everything will be completely the same. And then I will also have the option to play Halia on both. I can pay a fee and activate my clone on Burning Crusade Classic in that case and play both. And they will both have the same gold amounts that we had in the snapshot, same friends, etc. So it should feel the same and feel seamless. We're making a lot of effort to make it as smooth and as simple as possible.
Well, it seems like a lot of care has been taken to make that happen. And the first thing I thought of when it was announced was, all right, how are they going to handle this? They got these players that want to stay in vanilla forever, and there are some that clearly want to keep moving forward. And who knows how forward that ends up being in the future. But for right now, for Burning Crusade, it running through my head was all these ideas I could think of that you guys might try to make those people happy or to keep them happy where they are. And it sounds like this is the right way to do it. And you guys feel like you've explored as much as you can, or I guess the game's not out, so maybe there's still time to explore more and get feedback. But you feel pretty good about how that's going to launch in that state?
I think we feel pretty good, but of course, beta will tell us a lot more. So that's coming around the corner pretty soon. And we'll be looking for feedback on some of the decisions we have made. And of course, where we can, we'll improve it and make it the best possible experience as we can. We do expect the majority of players are going to go into Burning Crusade Classic. So we are putting a lot of effort on both sides to make it as smooth as possible so that you can just jump in and play.
Brian, I got one for you. It's somewhat related. How will high population numbers be handled in the Burning Crusade Classic? The zones are small, and funneling everyone into a single location has been less than optimal for the release experience anyway. Exactly how do you handle all the bottlenecks, as well as heavily shared mobs and questing areas, dailies, that sort of stuff?
Well, to a certain extent, there's a desire, I think, to recapture that challenge of fighting over contested spawns. That's part of the gameplay. But at the same time, we do recognize that this is, a high population of players, and we want to make sure that the experience is enjoyable. And so we have made optimizations and improvements to make sure that the servers are stable. We were able to leverage those to make sure that Encourage was stable and make sure that we can support high populations of players and make sure that the game is playable. But that experience of there's a spawn of a mineral node or a rare herb or a nether wing egg, and I want to get that and someone else is competing with me for it. That's part of the goal of the game. And so we don't want to make any major changes to that. But to the extent that we have higher populations than we normally did, we are willing to make some targeted changes if we see that there are problem areas. We did this with Black Lotus during Classic, and so if we see that there's some particular problem area, we will take a close look and see if there's something that needs to be adjusted for the fact that we have large populations.
All right, let's jump back into Shadowlands for a second with a question from Volrin from the Deep Pockets Guild. I could use some gold. Maybe I need to go there. Will we be receiving more race/class combinations, given the customization is such a major theme in this expansion? Ian, let's go to you.
Sure. So, I think player agency and choice are certainly a major theme of the expansion, and one of the ways that's expressed itself has been customization. We've seen a wider than ever array of cosmetics and other options for players to choose among. But part of what we've also been trying to reinforce and maintain is differences, is a world that consists of different paths. And whether it's everything from class design and the return of abilities to us carving out spec niches, we want to maintain a world where there isn't exact symmetry. Things are cool, but they can be cool in different ways. Now, we've over the years gone back and re-examined race-class combinations periodically. We've certainly reached a much more permissive open place in the modern game than was the case in Classic or Burning Crusade. And for now, we think we've gone about far enough. I think there are cultural differences. There's elements to these races' histories that preclude, for example, certain races from being demon hunters or certain races from being warlocks. And those are not lines we're looking to cross. But it's something we always re-examine going forward. So I think we don't have any plans in the middle of Shadowlands to change anything there, but I would never say never about any of these.
I think some people are surprised that that whether you're wearing cloth or plate, that you're going to be able to wear your Covenant's appearances across the board. That surprised a few people. Surprised me. Does it surprise you that you guys decided to go ahead and make that a little bit homogenous per Covenant?
I think that's one of those things that is a reflection of identity that we started really to broach with heritage armor. That was one of the first sets of armor that could be worn regardless of your class, regardless of material type. And when it comes to pure aesthetic expression, we want to give players more and more options there. And if you're someone who's looking for, you're a plate-wearing warrior, but you want more of a flowing robes vibe as you're going into combat, we have gameplay reasons why we don't want to let you transmog the entire range of cloth. But for these cosmetic sets that we introduce, the more options, the better.
Well, I love that stuff. Cynthia Lee wrote in, I think this is a good one for John. And this is very interesting. And I think, actually, I got a lot of this on the side, people saying, hey, you should ask this question. I'm like, well, I'm not really going to ask anything that I can't approve first, but turns out a lot of people asked it. World of Warcraft basically got me into the gaming industry, says Cynthia. I am super interested to know, how did your workflow change during this pandemic year? John, how did that go?
Wow, that's a great question. I think maybe first I'd like to start with how it changed us and maybe the way we think of what we do. Like everyone, this all happened very suddenly for us. One day we're working towards getting the next drop for the alpha out, and looking forward to getting Shadowlands complete. And then the next day we're all hustling to get quickly get things packed up and move to home. And I think at first it was just sort of settling in and trying to connect with each other through Zoom or, whatever medium we had. We had really great response from our IT team. And then the team kind of reached out to each other, to find comfort and just feel connected in some way. But I think the most important thing for us is, as we saw, the horrendous events that were happening around us, and the isolation really that was happening, not only to us but to everyone, and certainly to our players, we found a purpose for ourselves. It's like, hey, we can connect people. This is what WoW started with. This happened before social media and Facebook, and we have a way to bring people together, give them something to do and to pass the time, and hopefully reconnect with friends. And I think it was really cool in a way to know that we were able to do something that was actually going to bring some peace and solace to people in a time that was pretty troubling, and still is, for many folks. And we certainly feel extremely grateful for the ability to do this. In terms of, how other things has changed in our workflow, I think that we're all considering, well, when this is over and we can all get back together, what will that look like? And there's some aspects of being at home that we enjoy. For many, the long commutes aren't there. The ability to easily connect with your family and friends is really cool. And so I think we'd like to have some aspect of that, as I'm sure a lot of folks would. The hard parts are really, I would walk down the hall and, like Brian's literally like 3 doors down from me, and I could walk into the area where he and his team work and ask him a question or tell him some really cool news about what was going on, in terms of our players. And I can't do that now, or more than likely with me, because I forget, I'll ask a question, I'll go to Ian and he'll give me a very studious answer, and it's awesome. And then I'll be walking down the hall like, oh, but you know what? I should have asked him this, and I'll turn right around and I'll ask him. Like, now it's like, well, I just hung up the Zoom call. Do I really call him back up again? And I'm sure, our whole team sort of feels that way. And, especially the new team members, Holly hadn't even been with us that long before. We're like, okay, you're now working from home. Don't worry about moving.
Yeah, that must have been something else. All I know is, from a player and as a fan and somebody who pays a lot of attention to this sort of stuff, to see you guys launch a full expansion, and not only a big expansion, but one that was expected to break records given how many people were home, and an opportunity to get back into WoW, and have that happen with so little hitch. Like, I was shocked that day. I said, well, I'll be in queues all day, or it won't be up, or authentication servers will be down. I had all kinds of bad attitudes about what was going to happen. And you guys nailed it, and I'm still not entirely sure how you pulled it off, given all the circumstances you just described. But I assume you and the team are pretty proud of how that all went down.
Amazing team, Scott. I mean, I've been in the industry a lot of years, and this is truly the most professional team I've ever worked with. I mean, they love this game. We all came to the game because we were players and we loved it, and they just plowed on. Especially everyone on the team is awesome, but I think especially in finishing things, you look at our live ops team. Not only did they successfully get Shadowlands out without a hitch, and we certainly had some hitches. I certainly goofed by predicting the date a little bit ahead of time, but I think we did the right thing. We took the time to make the game right and really tune that in game. But the live ops team had to support not only that and the shifts that were going on there, but they went ahead and got Next Ramos out for us during that time, because we didn't want to let down the classic players just because Shadowlands was running a bit behind.
Well, it's a really impressive feat. Speaking of impressive feats, we got a lot of people wondering what happened to the Arkhan, and we have one in particular. Artharius asked, what happened to Arkhan? Is she dead, or is she just wounded? Steve, let's throw this one to you.
Yeah, we again, when we're reviewing these cinematics and talking about all the details, we actually I talked about that with Taryn Gregory, our director. I'm like, we should put some indication in there because we want to make it clear that she survives this. And so you see her hand kind of move. It's subtle, but it's there. But yeah, the idea is she does survive this attack. And when you come in to start playing Chains of Domination when it goes live, you basically pick up the story in the aftermath of this attack. And as you can imagine, once the Covenants all hear about it, that's going to put them into action. And so that kind of drives the impetus of the story. And if you think about the implications of the jailer sending someone to acquire the sigil from the Arkhan, the natural question is, well, who else out there has a similar sigil for their covenant, and are they a target as well? So that's the story that's going to unfold. It's super exciting. We're really looking forward to telling that story.
Excellent. Ian, I've got one for you here that turned out to be one of the most common questions that we received. Saressa from the EU Guild Worst Company says, do you plan to address the faction imbalance soon? Alliance guilds are really struggling right now and could use some help. Also, what happened to cause this?
So this is something we talk about a tremendous amount. We know there's a very real problem, in particular at the high end of the raiding and Mythic Plus scene. This is something that has been a growing issue over the past, really, I would say 6 to 8 years. I think as to what caused the problem, it was an imbalance in racials between the factions that was allowed to persist for a little bit too long. I think we saw over the years many top alliance guilds switch to Horde, particularly in the Mists of Pandaria era, a couple more in Warlords, a couple more in Legion, driven by orc and troll racials that simmed better, that just yielded higher DPS outputs or had specific advantages on fights. At this point, we don't think the racials are imbalanced. In fact, in Castle Nathria, Alliance, not even arguably, I think, had the all-around racial advantage. But the thing that keeps people on one faction or makes them tempted to move is the social dynamics. It's the feeling that if you're a raider looking to join a top-end guild, there are simply more options. And if your first choice doesn't work out, there's others to explore and fall back on. If you're looking to run high-end Mythic Plus dungeons, there are more people looking to do that content there. And that's a challenging problem to solve because really, we can't undo this movement that's happened over time. And it would take something tremendous to make people who had switched from Alliance to Horde want to suddenly switch back. We'd have to massively buff Alliance racials or something to the point where they were so overpowered that it really felt just bad. It just felt like it was game breaking, and we were really telling people that they should play the other faction. We've looked at where we can offer bonuses for the underrepresented faction where possible, but fundamentally, this is a social issue that's likely to need a social solution. We don't have anything super short term that we can do about this, but it is a top priority for us. Personally, in the past, on stage at BlizzCon, Alliance and Horde those are pillars of the Warcraft franchise. Those are pillars of what makes Warcraft Warcraft. And that's not something that we can just brush away. But we have begun to ask ourselves where the edges of that tension lie. We have something like mercenary mode in Battlegrounds that allow players to effectively, disguise themselves as a member of the opposite faction and play there to solve what were major battleground queue imbalances back in the day. It's essential to us that identity and faction matter in Warcraft, and that years from now, no matter what we do, when we're all together in Anaheim at BlizzCon, and someone, whether it's the successor of Chris Metzen, whether it's John, whoever, is up on stage rallying, where's the Horde at for the Alliance, that there are roars coming from the crowd for each faction. If we lose hold of that, we will have lost hold of something precious. And so that's the thing that we need to preserve at all costs, but not the cost of people's enjoyment and feeling at home and feeling like they can form and maintain friendships and WoW and do the content they want to do. So that's what we're trying to navigate. We don't have any specific answer to announce right now, but that's the problem that faces us and how we're thinking about it.
Do you ever see, this is a bit of a follow-up for me, but have you ever seen a swing in either direction, either faction population direction, due to story elements? Has an expansion come out like, I don't know, Warlords, and everybody suddenly went, ooh, that's very horde focused. I'm going to be horde this time and level a horde tune or whatever. Does that have any impact on this problem of faction imbalance?
A little bit, though. I think, to be clear, across the game as a whole, faction balance is actually solid, right? Alliance and Horde are relatively even if you're looking at the entire player base. It's when you start to look specifically at Mythic raiding guilds, specifically at the number of groups that are doing Mythic plus a certain level, above a certain level, that imbalances increasingly emerge. But those are also key socially driven activities. We certainly have seen, though, for example, in Battle for Azeroth, more people made cross-faction alts than ever before, because they wanted to see both sides of the story, and there were compelling differences to the war campaigns on each faction. But at the end of the day, that's not going to make you leave the group of friends that you've played with for a long time or your longtime guild. There's a bond there, and that bond is essential to Warcraft, to World of Warcraft.
Gotcha. Well, Brian, I've got one from you, or for you here. This is from several WoW Classic players, and they ask this. After I play Burning Crusade, when I decide to play my main character additionally on a Classic Era realm at 60, will you have my name reserved for me there, or is there a chance I'll have to rename my character?
Oh, that's a great question. And I think, kind of building on what Holly said, it really is like a snapshot taken at the time that we launched the patch. And so at that point, you do have your name in both places. Of course, part of the reason that we want to make people make a choice here and encourage them to choose the place that they want to go is so that we don't have people parking on those names forever. So at some point we might decide to relax that and let those names be unreserved. But if you decide on launch day that you're going to pay for the clone and you want to have that clone in both eras, you'll have your name in both places. One of the things that we are also concerned about, though, is what that looks like in Classic Era, as we expect most players to go to Burning Crusade, and we'll probably have to do something to resolve that. Our current plan is that you'll be able to keep your name, but probably have something similar to our Connected Realms that lets you have the realm name on the end so that we can resolve any conflicts if we have to do any mergers like that.
Interesting. So on some realms, there seems to be a mass exodus to higher population realms, and Nimbly from the Excessive Guild points out, are there any plans to connect more of them? So Ian, this is back to you. What happened last year with realm connections, and will that help any of what you talked about earlier?
Yeah, so I guess speaking of past BlizzCons, I think the last time we were all together for a BlizzCon, I talked about Connected Realms and answered a question there, and it was a massive undertaking, again, on the part of our heralded server and live operations team that John was talking about earlier, to really do just a survey of all of the realms across the world, their population trends, their faction balance, and come up with pairings and a series of connections that they worked through. And this is a manual process because we are effectively copying an entire realm's database of characters over to another realm. We have to deal with auction houses, mail, banks, all the rest. And so it's not something where we just flip a switch and make it happen. This is painstaking work. And we were able to address the large majority of the lowest population realms that over the years, we've seen people move to realms to be with their friends. Larger realms tend to be more attractive than smaller ones, and that's an ongoing process. We paused that process when Shadowlands launched for a couple of reasons. First off, launching Shadowlands and having a smooth Shadowlands launch had to be this group's #1 priority. Second, Shadowlands actually had huge effects on server populations. One of the things that made us gun-shy about doing realm connections in the past was that last time we did them was actually right before Warlords of Draenor. We connected a bunch of realms, saw people come back for Warlords, and suddenly these realms that had just been connected now had massive queues and instability to deal with. So we wanted to make sure that we saw how populations were going to settle down, and it's a tool that we continue to have that we will employ when realms feel like their population levels are too low to sustain healthy economies, healthy groups of guilds. But we also want to continue to look at what changes we can make to the game itself to make playing on those types of servers more attractive and just a better place to be. Because even if having connections happen is disruptive to those communities and to those realms, even if it's better than feeling like you're isolated. But things like cross-server gameplay over the years have, of course, significantly reduced the burden or the downsides of being on another realm, of being on a smaller realm. But we start to look at things like auction house economy and the rest, and there maybe is more that we could do there.
Well, and I know the answer to this already, and it's eternal to the Q&A of BlizzCon every year, I swear, but you're never going to let Horde and Alliance raid or Mythic Dungeon together, are you? That's just not going to happen. Like, that's never going to be a way to help this or the population issues we talked about before. Like, we're never getting that.
Also, I honestly would not say never. I think that's kind of what I was getting at with my answer earlier. There are a ton of reasons why it's essential to retain faction identity. But, for the sake of Rated Arena, from day one, Alliance could fight Alliance and Horde could fight Horde, right? When Burning Crusade launches, when Burning Crusade Classic comes out later this year, that will be a thing and that will be a competitive activity. And that was one of those areas where the gameplay and the need for matchmaking was the top priority and had to be. And so in an ideal world, all of these priorities would coexist. But at the end of the day, an MMO like World of Warcraft is about being able to play with your friends, being able to play where you want to be. And arguably, there's greater strength in the faction identity if you feel like you can truly choose the faction that you identify with, that you feel like most a part of, and not have to sacrifice that because, you need to be with your group or you want to join a higher rated guild. I mean, I have coworkers who are lifelong Alliance players who now play Horde, who really wish they could be Alliance, and they're doing it for guild reasons. And I know there are tens of thousands, maybe more, in that exact same boat around the world. We'd love to do something for them.
There's plenty in our guild that are in that boat, and I wish them well to stay with us. Let's stay with you for a second, and let's get into some anima. Reminar from the Ministry of Pain Guild asked this important question. Will our amount of anima be increased later? Is it possible for each of the Covenant Sanctums upgrades to be unlocked account-wide? There's a lot of collectibles across all Covenants, and to get them all would be a gargantuan feat at this point.
Well, so we have been tuning the anima economy since Shadowlands released. We recently hotfixed anima drops from raids and dungeons. We will be looking to add some new sources of anima going ahead in Chains of Domination as there's new world content and as the story advances to make that make sense. And we're overall looking at the costs. That said, the cosmetics themselves are generally account-wide, as cosmetics tend to be. And the anima system itself is a progression that is designed to span the bulk of Shadowlands. We have some new rewards and some new cosmetics to earn and goals to chase coming in Chains of Domination, but it's not like you're going to feel like you're falling farther and farther behind over the course of the expansion. We want people to feel like they can close in on those goals and reach a point where they have everything they want from the Venthyr Covenant, from the Curian Covenant, and can turn their attention to alts. If it feels like we're hearing feedback and we're looking at our data, if that progression isn't happening at a rate that feels satisfying, we absolutely will make adjustments.
All right, we're going to throw a question out here from Becest, who asked a question about Sire Denathrius. As we know, he is an eternal one, and Sire Denathrius is imprisoned by us after Castle Nathria. What will he do? Will we see him again, or is he forever trapped in that sword of his?
So this is a kind of fun story because it shows how our best laid plans can kind of adapt based on how the game develops. So I'll give you an example of, like, during Battle for Azeroth, we had intended for this character called Bwansambi to be one of the Loa to make kind of he was going to be there, but it was no big deal. There's a bunch of Loa in there. But once we heard the great Alex Desert give his performance as Bwansambi, we were like, oh man, this character is awesome. We need more of this character. And so then we were like, yeah, we could do this with him. We could do this with him. And of course, we carried him into Shadowlands, and he's got this whole dungeon, the other side, that tells more of his story because we love him so much. And so, as we're planning our heroes and our villains for Shadowlands, we're like, yeah, Sire Denathrius, he'll be this boss in the Castle Nathria raid, and you'll kill him, and cool, blah, blah, blah. And then we heard the actor Ray Chase give this performance, and from the very beginning, when we first heard his performance in the Revendreth animatic, we were just like, well, this guy's awesome. We love Sire Denathrius. And I think probably at some point along the way, as we're getting more VOs coming in, we're having sessions and we're loving them, I probably went to Morgan Day, one of our lead designers who oversees encounters, and I'm like, you know what? I kind of want to leave Sire Denathrius alive at the end of this because he's just too good. And I'm sure that we will find some other route for him to take in the future. And so
I'm really glad to hear that.
Yeah,
I'm glad to hear that. But also, I love that Bwansambi got similar treatment. That was such a treat to run into him in this expansion and go through that bit that I went through during the leveling process. I just thought, Well, it's good to see him again. I hope he never goes anywhere. So, all right, good news.
Yeah, and
Sire Denathrius probably not gone for good.
Yeah, that's one of the things that shows. Again, we watch fan feedback too to see what the community is responding to, who these characters are that they really gravitate to, and like the memes for Sire Denathrius, of course, are profound and many. So yeah, I won't give any spoilers, but he is in that sword. And there may just be allies of his that would be interested in liberating that sword from the Naru's grasp. But we'll just have to see what happens.
Have to wait and see. Well, all right. We've got a great question here from Ultravarius from the Guardians of Fate Guild. This is for Eli. When will we see more heritage armor? There are a few races who are still missing theirs. What's the deal with that?
Yeah, the heritage armors are awesome. As each one of them was, released into the game, I think we got more and more excited for not only the response, but just how much they enhanced the feel of the races in the game, and really, really did grasp the fantasy that we had set forward for those races over the years. So certainly we're working on the additional missing ones, and they will be released over time in near future content updates and some others that are a little bit further off. But yeah, they're definitely coming. We're really excited to share them with you.
That's great. They won't be missing forever. They're Ultravarius, however you say your name. Hey, we got one here for John again. This is from Prickle Pants from the Zul'jin realm. Fantastic name. John, he asks you this, John. Do you have any plans to bring the auction house back to the mobile app?
Well, not as you know it, per se. The auction house, unfortunately, on the mobile and website had kind of turned into a place where a lot of automation had really taken control. And so when we revamped the mobile app, we used that as an opportunity to let's get rid of the mobile auction house. Let's revamp the auction house in the game itself to make it, more fun, more accessible. It's really about players being able to trade with each other, to make crafted things for each other, and not necessarily for the accumulation of gold by automated systems. That being said, we recognize that there was a convenience factor for a lot of our players. I myself, back in the days when we used to, drive to work or whatever, if I knew in my commute I had to be, on a tight timeline to get to my raid, it was kind of convenient to be able to, buy up, whatever potions or food that I needed, and then get in the car and head home and be ready to go. So I think the things that are important for people to have and to be able to trade, we're going to consider putting that in some form so that they'll be able to do that. But you won't see a wholesale return of all things in the auction house to the mobile side.
Well, and as you mentioned, the auction house in-game has gone through a bit of a revamp itself. Do you feel like a lot of that is sufficient enough to sort of, I don't know, fill whatever hole that the mobile app won't?
Well, I mean, honestly, towards the end of the mobile app, there was very few people actually using it as intended. As I said, I think that we're seeing a lot more people participating in the app in the game, or excuse me, in the auction house in the game. And again, we want people to be in the game and interacting with each other. That's super important. But we don't want to take away the convenience of having them get access to things that they're gonna need when they're about to get into the game. And selfishly, like I said, I'm one of those commuters that needs to be able to get my things ready for the raid. So we recognize that and we want to provide that.
Sounds great. Huntmaster Averi from the Farstriders realm wrote in, and Eli, this is back to you. Will there be more new character customization options added in Shadowlands?
We're not going to add more character customizations to Shadowlands. Let me explain that. So the breadth of character customizations that we did add, we felt like was pretty good. And, we tried to add things for most every race. There are a few we didn't get as many customization options in for. And those are the kind of things that we'll be looking forward in the future, to what can we do for the races we maybe didn't do as much for, what would be the right choices there. We try to be really thoughtful about this type of thing. And these types of features tend to be fairly big projects. We want to make sure that we put the time in, that we're very thoughtful about it, and that we release new customizations when it's going to be really good for the game, really good for the players, and it's still going to, happen in parallel with getting new content out too. Like that's always our primary goal, is making sure that you have new content to play And we'll do these other things to enhance the game along the way, wherever they make sense, and when we have a really good plan for it.
I don't know if you guys got a lot of this feedback or not, but I can tell you that the thing I had the most fun with the pre-patch was going and getting those customizations done to myself, heading into the barber and going, are you kidding me? I can now have a scar that runs from my eye down to my lip, and half my tusk is broken, and whatever, like that stuff turned out to be really great. Did you overall get really good feedback about that? Do you feel like giving those extra options was worth it to the players?
Oh, definitely. And I remember even when we announced that this was happening, and I might have even been in a Q&A actually. The outcry and the sort of support for it was huge. Then we've seen tremendous support and tremendous outcry from the community. Just how happy everybody is seeing this, and of course, as players of the game, we're super excited about it too. And the first thing I did on every one of my characters was go in and start customizing them, as well as get into the character create screen and just look at all the options, hit the random button over and over and over again to just really get a sense for what's in there. So I think it's a really exciting feature, and certainly something we want to invest in a big way going forward when it makes sense.
Yeah, those are fantastic. Radium from the guild Inertia has a question for Ian. What are the actual requirements for flying in Shadowlands? Where can we fly? And can we fly from one area to another? For example, from Ardenweald to Oribos. Follow-up. I'll save the follow-up. Tell me how that's going to work.
Okay.
When flying is indeed available to everybody.
It's short and sweet. Shadowlands Pathfinder, which is coming in Chains of Domination, will not require any reputations. This is different from Pathfinder achievements in past expansions. It just requires completing your full campaign, the Covenant campaign, and the new chapters that are being added in Chains of Domination. Once you've done that, you have mastered the outdoor world of the Shadowlands, you've restored much of the flow of anima, and you can earn the ability to fly within the Shadowlands. Now, you cannot fly directly from zone to zone. I can give you the technical reason for this, but it actually also matches the in-world reason, which is these are not zones that are just next to each other, right? When you go through that portal in Oribos and you're streaking, from one area to another, and you have this energy rushing past you, you're actually traveling vast distances. Even if we said, you know what, we don't care that it looks janky, we're going to let you fly, you'd actually probably have to auto fly for something like 30 or 40 minutes to get from one zone to the other. You probably don't want that. Use the fly paths, but then once you're in the zones, you can traverse them completely freely.
That's really interesting. I didn't realize that there was that much. I think maybe what throws people off is the map. They bring up the map and they just sort of, in traditional WoW fashion, see that everything's sort of spaced around like it would be a normal map or whatever. But that's a really interesting way to look at it. So here's the follow-up. What about their alts? So after you unlock flying, can their alt fly at 50, or is there still a requirement to level fully up, go through those, go through all the rigmarole to get it, or can they just do it?
Yep. Pathfinder is an account-wide achievement, and so when you can fly in the Shadowlands, you, the player, have earned the right to fly in the Shadowlands, just as prior Pathfinder achievements have worked.
That is fantastic news. My paladin thanks you. Let's move over to Brian. We got a question from others from the Quiddy Viddy Guild, who says, in the Burning Crusade Classic, will there be the possibility of class tuning? Says that would make it notably different than in 2007.
That's a great question. And in general, the answer is broadly no. We want to kind of keep the authentic behavior that was in the final patch of Burning Crusade the same way we did with Classic. We believe that's the most tuned and correct version of Classic that had the most time, or excuse me, of Classic Burning Crusade, that had the most time for the designers to get things balanced right. And so that's what we're going to ship with at launch and keep it throughout. That said, I do have a slight caveat for anybody who hasn't heard it in any of our other interviews. We do want to try to adjust things like faction imbalance. We know that when they were adding Alliance, Alliance Shaman and Horde Paladins, the intent was to try to make the factions a level playing field, like give both classes, all the classes to both factions, and we want to make sure that kind of design intent is honored. And so we realize that when we look back with the benefit of our years of experience now, we can see that Seal of Blood is actually significantly better than Seal of Vengeance, and we don't want that to be a reason for people to suddenly flock off to the Horde. Kind of like alluding to Ian's answer earlier, this is the same kind of issue that we have here. And so what we want to do is give the Alliance Seal of the Martyr at level 70. So they'll unlock Seal of Vengeance at level 64 and Seal of the Martyr at level 70. and the Horde will unlock Seal of Blood at level 64 and Seal of Vengeance at level 70. But beyond that, we aren't doing anything major.
Okay, sounds good. Classic players, a lot of people want to know about that. Here's one for Ian again from Whoopi from the Is Kindred Guild. It says this question: is there work currently being done on new Torghast anima powers for later patches, specifically spec-specific powers, and what does that look like, and when might we see them?
All throughout Shadowlands. We have tuning ongoing to a lot of the spec-specific powers that players have seen on the patch 905 public test realm that's live right now. And as we continue to expand Torghast going forward into Chains of Domination, there will be all new powers, because we know powers are one of the star pieces of Torghast. It's a chance to break the rules, it's a chance to be overpowered, and to have your character feel and play like it does and can nowhere else in the game. And so that's something we're excited to keep building on, and we'll do it as it makes sense. We're looking a lot at both stats and feedback from players to see which specs may need more build diversity and more just really like punchy, memorable moments coming out of their Torghast runs.
So tiny little bit of indulgence here. I had a theory a while back on one of my shows that one cool feature of Torghast could be go to Torghast, do your thing. You've got all these anima fixes that are now on you toward the end of your run. You finish, you beat the final boss, and you exit. How cool would it be if you could run around the maw for, let's say, 8 minutes? Not very long, just a little counter up in there like a buff, where you retain all your anima powers in the maw for that brief amount of time. So you've got your, I don't know, your all the extra stuff that happens to every character in every class. Is that anything you guys would ever consider? Has that ever come across your minds or been on a whiteboard anywhere?
I can see Rextroy over there just drooling right now. Like, don't let that guy get his hold of any of this, or all of our raid bosses will fall over in 2 seconds. There are a lot of rules that we break in actually how we build those powers for Torghast that make it challenging to let them work in the outdoor world. Also, war mode players might have a thing or two to say about that, but I think let's keep the overpoweredness in Torghast. And yeah, there are also profound fantasy reasons why the condensed anima powers fade the moment you exit the domain of the jailer that I'm sure Steve could elaborate on at great length. But we also want to leave time for other people to ask their questions.
That's true. All right, Carol. In fact, Steve, we're going to throw you this one. Carol from the Blade Fist realm had this question. What is the difference between the passage of time in Shadowlands and on Azeroth? Salinar, the Horseman, and Death Knight Order Hall campaign, or in that, says he was in the veil between Azeroth and Shadowlands since we met him, and it felt like mere days for him between Wrath of the Lich King and Legion.
Yeah, there's a number of different characters you meet and interact with through the course of Shadowlands, for whom time doesn't seem to have very much meaning. And in fact, like the Rune Carver, you go talk to the Rune Carver, when you meet him, he has a line that time is not a construct of death. And that's true. When you think about it, what is time a construct of? It's a construct of order. And we on Azeroth, when we're there, we understand the passage of time, much like we do in the real world, because of the influence of the Titans and beings of order. But when you're in those cosmic realms that are far away from the realms of order, time loses its meaning. And so it's not so much that there's it's X number of days versus Y number over here. It's just that the Shadowlands are about eternities and about just kind of losing yourself in those threads of fate. And so it's just that time doesn't really mean anything there. And so you can have it perceived differently by different characters that could be in the same circumstance, but it's just the effect of what they're going through that really determines how they perceive it.
Gotcha. Ian, back to you on this one. We've got a question about this is from Harrison, by the way. So would you guys ever consider bringing back 10-man content? I'll add my name to this list of someone who loved their 10-man content, either as a different difficulty for raids or as an entirely different instance for smaller groups to tackle. Is that ever going to happen?
I think when it comes to raid content, effectively all of it is 10-player content now. I know some people specifically want mythic difficulty, but it feels like the thrust of this question, actually the spirit of it, is about that different thing that you can do with a smaller group of friends. And I would say in World of Warcraft today, it's our 5-player mega dungeons that fill that role. Just as in Burning Crusade, when raiding was 25 players as an activity, the idea of a 10-player raid like Karazhan or Zulaman was a novel experience to let you have a more intimate, shared, romp through a dungeon, through a raid adventure with a smaller group of your friends. That's what mega dungeons try to do. They try to give an experience that is raid-like, that you can just take with a smaller group of friends that you couldn't raid with normally. It's an experience that can span hours. You have bosses that have progression and a setting that is just epic. As cool as our dungeons are, places like Karazhan or Operation Mechagon or the upcoming Broker Dungeon just blow them away. And so I think that is where the spirit of 10-player content lives on today.
Wow, that's an interesting take. I hadn't thought of it that way. That sounds about right. We've got a question submitted by Dizdick. Brian, this is for you. Will summoning stones be available at launch in the Burning Crusade, or are those going to come later?
Oh, that's an easy one. We will absolutely have those at launch in the Burning Crusade. They were introduced originally with Burning Crusade, and they replaced the original meeting stones. And we actually in Classic had to disable that functionality to try to bring back that authentic experience. It'll be a pleasure to be able to bring it back. I know I enjoyed using them very much myself as a way to kind of bring other people over to the dungeon when we were waiting for them to run over. And I think it's a really good feature for a Burning Crusade to be able to have those.
All right, sounds great. Got a great one here for Steve. And this is many players, many variations of this question, but here's the one we settled with. What's Bolvar up to, and where is his story going in Shadowlands? Will he have a major role to play? I would think yes, but let's hear it from you.
Yeah, it was one of the great fun things about Shadowlands was to be able to get Bolvar Fordragon, this legendary hero, back in the mix again, free of the Lich King's crown, being himself again, and bringing all that knowledge and wisdom to the table. And we saw him being, pivotal in us getting to the Shadowlands, in guiding us as we went to rescue our friends Thrall, Jaina, Bane, from Torghast. And we saw that there was a price to pay for those visions where he got to peer in there and see what the jailer and Sylvanas were up to with Anduin. But he will be front and center for Chains of Domination. He is a great figure to kind of rally the Covenants together and go into the Maw with them and be at the forefront of those efforts of taking the fight to the jailer. So it's going to be really fun to see him in action again.
Oh, I can't wait. Lately, he just he just stands around the desk in the Oribos, and it's fine. But I can't wait to see what he does next.
Yeah, he's got a cool hammer, right? Like he's got to swing the hammer.
Right. I need to see that thing in action. We will soon enough, I suppose. Mask of Death from the Epoch of Thought Guild wrote in. This one's for Brian. In Burning Crusade, how will PvP titles such as Gladiator, Duelist, and Rival be determined, considering we don't have established battle groups? And I got a little follow-up to that, depending on what you say.
Sure. I mean, that's a really good question, and that comes from, like, originally there was a award for the top player in each battle group, and that really came from the fact that we had technical restrictions where people playing on different, like, hardware installations, like different data center sites, couldn't play with ones playing in other data center sites. And we actually don't have that restriction anymore. You can actually match make players across the entire region. And so we think a more fair way to approach this today is to just do a small percentage of people at the very top. We do want to award it to more than like one person, but still a very exclusive title where we want to keep it to like a top select few that is similar to, like, it was, I think, 13 about per region back then. I see Ian nodding. So yeah,
we had 13 battle groups in North America, and I think depended on size, but pretty similar. There were like hundreds of people with this title out of millions of players.
Yeah. Right, it's very small and very exclusive. So we want to do that, and we want to do a top percentages of those players region wide for that.
So is it appropriate to have Arena Season 1 start so early in Burning Crusade then?
We actually think we were talking about maybe we want to start it earlier than we announced in the deep dive panel. We're talking, as we've been looking at the gear, we think that it actually might fit more with Karazhan and the Tier 4 gear, and so we might actually move all the Arena seasons up so that Arena Season 1 starts when Karazhan and Gruul and Magtheridon's Lair come out, and then probably have Zul'Aman come out without an Arena season so that the next season we'll skip over that one.
Well, Chrissy wrote in, had one for Steve. It says, in Stormwind, I noticed some of the refugees from Darnassus mention going back once the smoke clears to collect any belongings. Does this mean that Teldrassil could be rebuilt / regrown and become inhabitable again?
So the devastation to Teldrassil was pretty definitive, and there were a lot of lives lost there, and that's not something that we want to just reverse on a whim. But what I will say is that the story of what the Night Elves went through, of those souls that died there, that as we have found out, if you play the Ardenweald campaign, you'll know that they funneled into the Maw. their story is not yet done. And certainly a figure who is bound up in that story is Tyrande Whisperwind. And she is very much on the path of trying to find out the future of her people, even as she's dealing with that thirst for revenge against Sylvanas and dealing with the Night Warrior powers that are growing to consume her. So that's definitely a story that we'll be talking about as we go into Chains of Domination and beyond.
Yeah, she seemed pretty ticked, so I suspect
And
we're not done.
good
with
reason,
that.
yep.
Yep. Oh, yeah. Holly, here's one for you. Will you open fresh classic servers in addition rather to the TBC servers? There seems to be a large demand for it, asks Shadow Wedbro. He's from a Few Good Lads Guild. What do you think about that? Another classic server given the demand?
Great question. For our timeline for Burning Crusade Classic, we won't be launching any fresh start servers, but I can promise you we've got our eyes on that in our future, and we'll be discussing it once we get through a stable and successful launch with Burning Crusade Classic.
Nice. And what are the things that has been talked about before is layering? Do you guys still have many concerns about players' reaction to layering, and they want this authentic experience that existed when the game first launched, and by the time TBC rolled around, there were better ways to deal with things anyway, so not so much of an issue? But are you worried at all about that still? I mean, I know it's an issue for some players. Is that an issue for you guys?
Honestly, our focus is on whoever wants to play should be able to play. We would rather have layers on for a short period of time if necessary, so that everyone can get in and play. And that's always going to be our focus, serve as many players as we can who want to play.
Fantastic. We do have time for one big final question. There was a whole lot of video at this BlizzCon Online that made a lot of people very excited. Actually, I have all kinds of personal questions about it, but I'm going to hold those and instead ask this common question that we got in the Twitch chat today. How do you get the Wandering Ancient mount? John, you want to handle this one?
Oh, you bet. That's a great one. So, little background. Last year, when we were finishing up Shadowlands, our art team really, they were ahead of schedule, or at least they were on schedule. And we decided, it would be awesome to give a gift back to all of our players and build a mount for them. And so the art team put together some cool ideas. They brainstormed on things they wanted, and we literally put it to a vote, and we let our community decide what would they like for us to make for them. And the winner was the Wandering Ancient. And so the requirement to get the Wandering Ancient really is you got to have Shadowlands. And we will have the Wandering Ancient in the 905 patch update. And that will be next month. I won't tell you the exact date because, but you can probably guess, and you'll be pretty close. But we want to make sure that the patch is ready before we put it out. But we're really excited that you'll be able to ride that around. It is a really awesome mount. And if you have a question, I want to be able to answer that. But since you said this is the final question, I just want to thank you, Scott, for being our host, being a familiar face, supporting our community and us. You do such a great job. So thank you for agreeing to do this for us.
Oh, well, thank you. It's absolutely my pleasure. In fact, since we're being so nice to each other, I really liked your introduction for the WoW stuff. But also, my last question for you is a tack on to the Wandering Ancient. Can you confirm or deny that there's a little worm on top that actually controls this millennium-old treant who would probably not want somebody sitting on them anytime they felt like
Don't tell the story about the worm. You can't talk about the worm, John. I told you, do not talk about the worm.
Shoot. I was afraid that this was a topic we were not going to be able to touch.
I'd be willing to bet that Eli's got something in that Wandering Ancient that only the art team knows about.
There is a worm. I'm not going to reveal their relationship. It's very special.
Wow. All right.
But I suggest watching the panel around how we went about creating it. I think it's going to be really interesting for everybody to watch, and it is a really awesome mount. So definitely check it out.
And wait till you hear the actor that we have voicing the worm.
Yeah, one of the best.
Well, just like the worm, it has to leave sometime, and we do too. But I do want to say a gigantic thank you to everybody on this panel. You guys were awesome this year, and such a strange year to be able to still get together and ask the questions and talk about the game in this way is just it's a great experience for me. I know that for sure, and I know a lot of people listening really appreciate it as well. So thank you guys for your time and for sharing your answers with the community. And moreover, huge thanks to the community. You guys don't have a Q&A without your questions. There's no A without the Q. So thank you for submitting those and for being a part of this each and every time that it happens. So that's going to do it for us. Thank you all for watching the Q&A. Hope you really enjoy the rest of the Saturday's content. And go play WoW. Play a Demon Hunter. He's really good in zones that you don't like playing with other classes. You can fly really high, and it's really great. I'm not pointing at anything particular. I'm not going to get specific, but I'm just saying Demon Hunter's for the win right now in a certain covenant. Anyway, that's going to do it for us. Thank you all for watching, and we'll see you soon.